Christmas. That time of the year when those of us who don't celebrate try to immerse ourselves in the immaculate vibes and get some time off of work or school or whatever else we have going on in our lives. Although violent homicidal rage fests might seem like the antithesis of the Christmas spirit, when I think of Christmas, video games absolutely do come to mind. December is really the part of the year where I get to kick back, relax, and turn on my law enforcement friendly murder simulators and play for hours on end. This year in particular has been a bit of a mess, and that has strangely resulted in me experiencing a surplus of my version of the festive cheer, which is why I decided to subscribe to PS Plus Extra and look for Christmas games available as part of the catalog. Now, before we get to discussing the two games that I decided to play, I think it'd be fruitful to delineate what exactly constitutes a Christmas game. While games about everybody's Lord and Savior and Santa sleigh simulators might seem like ideal Christmas games, I think that Christmas games belong to a broader category than what you'd bring to your church's show and tell. But the category does have certain restraints. Not all games set in the winter season can be a Christmas game after all. Personally, I think that games that are generally set in the winter season that also acknowledge their setting and are able to invoke warm and fuzzy feelings inside of you and largely follow themes of love and kindness are Christmas games. This definition also seems quite broad, but you will get what I mean once we go through the video. One more thing about Christmas games. They're generally bite sized adventures because strolling away at a 40-hour long campaign like Santa's underpaid little helpers who are crushed under the weight of this capitalistic society just doesn't seem very appealing. The first game we're talking about is the critically acclaimed spin off to a critically acclaimed 2018 game by a critically acclaimed studio. Spider Man Miles Morales was a PS5 launch title, and boy was it a good one. When I started playing this game, I was extremely apprehensive. Look, the 2018 title was fantastic, but all game journalists branded this as more of the same, and we've already played multiple games with Arkham Wars combat way too many times. While the journalists in question were certainly not incorrect, this game transcends its predecessor in my eyes, and that alone warrants its existence. That being said, the $50 price tag it had at launch is certainly not justified, given that you could have told me that this was DLC for the first game and I would have believed you. But when Insomniac charges a premium for a remastered version of a game released in 2018, I guess I can't really expect too much. Either way, I'll be evaluating this game in the current context, after it has been out for a while and has seen significant price drops. I played it as part of the extra catalog, and I strongly believe that that's the way to go with this one. Now that I'm done scrutinizing Insomniac's business practices, let's talk about the game itself. After Peter Parker decides to go on a business trip with his beloved, Miles Morales is left to fill the shoes of New York's friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Having completely dragged up a shopping mall after releasing a dangerous convict by accident, his confidence is not at an all-time high. Till he discovers that he has special bioelectric abilities that make him seem like Spider-Man and Electro's love child. Seriously, MJ should watch out. Miles' insecurity and his struggle to find his footing as Spider-Man while he negotiates a balance between his personal life and his duty to his community is the central conflict of the game, with the introduction of a new villain, the Tinkerer, providing the perfect means to explore this conflict while having cinematic set pieces that rival the likes of the Uncharted series. I'll go more in depth on the plot in the spoiler section, but the main takeaway is that it's a fairly standard superhero plot with slightly more nuanced discussions about identity, community, as well as some cliches about big corporations and chosen family thrown in there for good measure. It's competent, but I could never shake the feeling that it was retreading familiar ground for the umpteenth time. I think at this point I just want a game where I play as a villain who's evil for evil's sake and nothing more. Turning to the gameplay, it's certainly more of what you loved from the previous game, but with an extra spark. Turns out the radioactive spider that bit Miles had won over the spider that bit Peter because Miles can make use of electric attacks. There's a few abilities that you unlock through the course of the game, and these seem to replace the suit abilities that we had in the previous one, but with slightly more nuanced use cases. Different enemy types for and different kinds of venom attacks. Yes, it's called venom but has nothing to do with that black space blob. They're also great for taking the fight to the air and attaining high combos. This game, like the previous one, commits the cardinal sin of providing other weapons for Spider-Man to use without mapping them to button combinations like the Arkham games did, which makes actually using these weapons a pain, since the combat flow screeches to a halt when you pull up the weapon selection screen. They are still useful in stealth, but stealth as a whole is turned into a cakewalk because of Miles' cloak ability, which literally renders him invisible. To be fair, between aerial combos, web swings, throwable objects, web yanks, the classic web shooter, standard combat moves, perfect dodges, and venom abilities, there's fair little reason to switch to the tools anyway. All of this may sound like it makes Spider Man overpowered, and it absolutely does when you get to New Game Plus. But the breadth of abilities offered are balanced by an introduction of tougher and tougher enemies and enemy combinations as you move through the campaign, making Miles Morales a very lean experience that moves at a brisk pace. I was also struck by the way that enemy encounters are handled here. Throughout the campaign, there are multiple instances of large scale battles that are truly engaging because of the enemy placement and behavior. Enemies are found at various levels of verticality, and there is generally an option to thin the crowds using stealth before initiating a brawl. Enemy AI seems to be generally competent at making sure that there's someone around to beat up to keep the combo chain going. Although there's frequently one or two nascent henchmen who get stuck on some scenery and need to be peekabooed to death. All of this lends a very cinematic feel to the fights and makes it seem like you're playing a proper Spider-Man game, which takes the fact that Spider-Men can fight at various altitudes into consideration, instead of simply being an Arkham rehash that segregates stealth and action sections. The combat overall is great, and I was also content with the medley of side activities that the game provided me with. While side missions may seem like regular gaming riffraff at this point, this game had some of its best moments hidden away in these side quests. The fact that it didn't feel the need to fill this game chock full of meaningless collectibles to compensate for the admittedly short runtime means that the side quests that are there are allowed to shine. Now, there are some collectibles, but each of these come with a story, and there's just about enough for your lizard brain to feel satiated and not overwhelmed. The puzzles here are just pathetic though, and I really wish that the next game in the series realizes the potential that physics based puzzles have in this universe. That's all about the gameplay, let's talk spoilers now. Like I mentioned before, I think that the plot is competent. The shorter length of the game means that plot points aren't dwelled on for longer than necessary, and the brisk pace is befitting of any blockbuster superhero flick. Miles' gradual rise in confidence is believable, his love for his family and friends is palpable, and the motivations of each of the characters are comprehensible. My main issue with this plot is that it does fair little to stand out. Miles' tale as a boy who lost a family member and got gifted superpowers that he's using for good, as well as Finn's villain backstory of losing a family member and trying to take revenge on the corporation that brought on his demise, are both something that we've seen already. The tension that such plots usually carry is completely undermined by the fact that the reveal of each of their identities to the other, as well as to the audience, has very little lead up to it. Aaron Davis's role could have been the perfect wildcard, but even that is underwhelming because of how quickly he finds out about Miles' powers and how obvious his every move is. Speaking of, the whole secret identity thing is seriously not working for Miles. He's more exposed than LA influencers after a night out with their frenemies. Finn's frustration with Miles is understandable, but her going through with her plan despite his warnings make her seem just obtuse. But that's nothing in comparison to the Elon Musk stand-in who is simply insufferable. I understand that he's supposed to be annoying, but dear god, they could have tried to make the sole motivator of the entire plot even remotely interesting. I will say that the fact that Miles sees the flaws in Davis and understands the value of chosen family over hurtful biological family members is a good subversion of the classic Disney trope of bad family turning good, and the characters, viewed in isolation, are fairly well written. I just wish that the next game manages to scramble together something more novel than this one did. Overall, I think that Spider-Man Miles Morales is an excellent standalone DLC whose use of cliches is justified by just how much plain fun it is. It's also an excellent Christmas game given its themes and how it's simply great family-friendly fun till you swing kick an enemy off the roof of a 20-story building, that is. The brevity of the game means that you can blast through it in an afternoon or two, leaving time for what's truly important. Demon's Soul, family. Cat Sim Game of the Year. What more can I say about Stray? Well, a lot, evidently, since I was originally planning on making an in-depth critique of this game, before I realized that I had a total of 15 minutes of footage despite the fact that I played through it 2 whole times, with the second playthrough being a speedrun which would have been the perfect screen cap to substantiate what I had to say about it. Yay me. In case you haven't heard about this one, Stray is an indie game that has won the hearts of critics and audiences alike through its portrayal of an orange cat stuck in a cyberpunk world. Seeing the praise that this game has garnered, I was fully expecting it to be an overhyped, boring, and repetitive experience that was only liked by the not like other girls crowd. Having played through it, I can confidently say that this is simply not the case. Stray is hands down one of my favorite games that I've played all year, and the decisions that the developers made, or perhaps ones that they were forced to make given their budget, have made it stand out in a sea of similar looking, monotonous AAA releases on the PS5. I described Miles Morales as a brisk experience, but Stray is even more so. Something about the way that the developers captured the retro future vibe that this game is going for actually compelled me to stop and smell the roses of my own volition, even foregoing my desire to get the platinum in this game, which I did eventually nab. Old habits die hard, I guess. When my main complaint with the game is that I want more of it, I think that it has definitely done something right. The other complaint that I have is less excusable for what this game is trying to be though. The mandible of the cat looks slightly odd at times, which detracts from its cuteness, and I simply find that to be unforgivable. To describe why I like this game is kind of hard, in a similar way to describing what a Christmas game is. I'll instead explain why I thought this game wasn't going to live up to the hype and why my initial judgment was wrong. Firstly, through the coverage of the game that I saw on popular websites and YouTube channels, I thought that the X to jump prompt was going to severely limit how well you could interact with the world of Stray. Turns out, everything that you think will be climbable is climbable. And while the devs do make it impossible for you to die from a fall by limiting where you can jump, there's no significant hindrance to how mobile the cat is in this regard. The second of my expectations was that the game will feature extremely linear 4 stealth sections as the core gameplay mechanic, which simply wasn't the case. Sure, the game is linear, but there are more open hub worlds to explore within which you can preemptively complete objectives. The lack of a map of any kind also makes exploration feel more organic and rewarding. And the stealth sections I was worried about, turns out they're accompanied by some pretty epic chases, point and click style puzzles, and that they are themselves not bad at all. There is an extraordinary amount of variety in what you're doing here, and the breakneck pacing of the plot makes it so that you are never stuck on one thing for too long. This does come at a cost. Drawing a comparison to the other game I just talked about, while I felt that Miles Morales allowed me to fully engage with its systems throughout the course of the game, Stray felt more like it was teasing me with mechanics without letting me explore their depth. Sure, this might just be because these systems served their purpose and didn't actually have a lot of depth to explore in the first place, but what I saw here definitely left me with a thirst for more. Let's talk spoilers real quick. The post-apocalyptic setting of the game, where all humans appear to have been wiped clean off the face of the planet, sets a very curious scene for Furball Simulator. But I think that the robots that the humans have left in their place are a delight to interact with. The only one I wish I had more time with was Balthazar, because what does AI meditation even look like? The way that the entire setting is structured is also fantastic. The literal representation of a social hierarchy and your exploration of the problems of each part of the social strata make for an intriguing parallel to the real world, one which may not be fully realized, but that certainly does serve its purpose. Something about the slums being plagued by ravenous bacteria, while Midtown is forced into submission by the Sentinels, is oddly poetic. And so is the omission of the orchestrators of the stratification, who presumably suffered a grisly fate as they were forever lost to time. The reveal of B12 being a human who uploaded his consciousness to the cloud is similarly fascinating, and I'm glad that he goes out with a heroic sacrifice because the last human's continued existence as an immortal bot would, I feel, somewhat cheapen the blow. The way that the devs present new problems for you to deal with each time you enter a new part of the complex, as well as when you transition between them, is honestly masterful, and it keeps the adventure feeling fresh mechanically. Once again, I do think that they could have taken advantage of the systems they set in place by offering more complex challenges, and I hope that the success of this game will push them to do exactly that. The last thing I'll say in this section is that there's a really weird suspension of disbelief that comes with playing a regular cat who's wrapped up in this plot of robots trying to escape their underground prison. A cat that's both obedient, smart, and orange. And this took me out of the experience each time it popped into my head. In conclusion, I think that Stray is a really novel experience that deserves all of the plaudits it has been granted, and I'm excited to see what its devs come up with next. This game is the perfect Christmas game, given just how cozy its vibe is. There are some parts that will tear you to shreds if you can't see animals in pain though, so stray into this experience with caution. And that's it for my Christmas video. Like I said, I have some time in December, so I'll work on some more stuff as I recover from academic burnout. This channel has just become a way for me to catalog my feelings and thoughts about games that I'm playing, and I really hope that I have more time to work on stuff in the coming year. The next game I'll be covering should be Demon Souls. Hopefully I'll be done with that before the new year. I hope you enjoy the holidays.